The tyranny of I deserve it, how this phrase is destroying your financial future. I watched her hands tremble as she signed the bankruptcy papers. Sarah was 34 years old, made $73,000 a year, and somehow managed to accumulate $89,000 in consumer debt. The thing that haunts me to this day wasn't the number itself. It was what she whispered right before putting pen to paper. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. 3 words kept appearing in her credit card statements, month after month, purchase after purchase. 3 words that had become the most expensive mantra of her entire life. I deserve this. A $200 brunch because the week was hard. A vacation she couldn't afford because her co-worker went to Bali. The luxury candles, the subscription boxes, the designer handbag that would make her feel successful. Each swipe of the card was accompanied by the same internal dialogue, the same justification that felt so righteous in the moment. I deserve this. And here's what terrifies me about Sarah's story. She's not unique. She's not even unusual. She's the statistical average of what's happening right now, in this very moment. To millions of people who have weaponized a phrase that sounds like self-care, but functions like financial suicide. The sensation you're feeling right now, that slight defensiveness rising in your chest, that voice saying, "But I do work hard, I do deserve nice things," that's exactly what we need to talk about. Because somewhere between genuine self-worth and complete financial collapse, we crossed a line that nobody seems willing to acknowledge. Let me take you back to where this actually started, because the "I deserve it" mentality didn't just appear overnight. It was carefully cultivated, methodically marketed, and brilliantly disguised as empowerment. Around 2010, something shifted in advertising. Companies stopped selling products and started selling identity. They stopped telling you what their stuff did and started telling you who you'd become if you bought it. The message was intoxicating in its simplicity. You're worth it. Treat yourself. You deserve the best. Self-care isn't selfish. These weren't just taglines. They were psychological permission slips. They took the natural human desire for comfort and status and repackaged it as virtue. Suddenly, buying things you couldn't afford wasn't irresponsible. It was radical self-love. Going into debt wasn't poor planning. It was refusing to deny yourself joy in an uncertain world. The marketing worked because it tapped into something real. We are working harder than previous generations in many ways. We are dealing with unprecedented financial pressures. Housing costs have skyrocketed, wage growth has stagnated, and the social contract that promised stability in exchange for hard work has been shattered. So when someone tells you that you deserve that expensive coffee, that luxury skincare, that weekend getaway, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like someone finally seeing your struggle and validating your pain. But here's where the trap snaps shut, and most people don't even hear the click. The problem isn't that you don't deserve good things. The problem is that deserve has become completely disconnected from economic reality. Let me show you how this plays out in real life. Marcus was 28, worked in tech support, and made $52,000 a year. He lived in a city where a 1-bedroom apartment cost $1,900 a month. After taxes, rent, utilities, and his student loan payments, he had about $1,200 left each month for everything else. Food, transportation, insurance, savings, everything. But Marcus worked hard. He spent his days being yelled at by people whose internet wasn't working, fixing problems that weren't his fault, absorbing stress that wasn't his to carry. So when Friday rolled around, when his friends suggested that new restaurant everyone was talking about, when the bill came to $85 for his share, a voice in his head spoke up. I deserve this. I worked 60 hours this week. I skipped lunch twice. I stayed late to fix that server issue. I deserve to enjoy my life, and he's right, he does deserve to enjoy his life. But here's the question nobody wants to ask. Does deserving something mean you can afford it? Does your emotional justification change your bank balance? Does the universe care about your hardship when your rent is due? Because Marcus said, I deserve this, about 17 times that month. Dinner with friends, a new gaming console, concert tickets, the shoes he'd been eyeing, a subscription to that meal delivery service. Each purchase was individually justifiable. Each one was emotionally valid. And together, They created a $470 gap between his income and his spending. Now, before you think this is just about individual weakness or poor choices, I need you to understand something crucial. The "I deserve it" mentality has been engineered into the fabric of modern consumer culture with the precision of a military operation. There are people with PhDs in behavioral psychology whose entire job is figuring out how to make you feel like you deserve their product. They study your insecurities, map your pain points, and craft messages that bypass your rational brain entirely. They know that deserve is an emotional word, not a financial one. They know that when you're stressed, tired, or feeling undervalued, your resistance to emotional spending drops dramatically. They know that instant gratification hits the same neural pathways as addictive substances, and they weaponize every single bit of that knowledge. The Instagram ad that appears right after a difficult work meeting. The influencer who makes that product look like the missing piece of a perfect life. The email subject line that reads, "You've earned this. These aren't accidents. These are calculated psychological triggers designed to make you reach for your wallet before your brain can engage." And here's what makes it particularly insidious. The "I deserve it" framework makes you feel like resisting is self-betrayal. If you don't buy the thing, you're denying yourself, you're being cheap with yourself, you're reinforcing the idea that you're not worthy of good things. So the very act of financial responsibility gets reframed as self-harm. Saying no to unnecessary purchases becomes an act of self-punishment rather than self-preservation. If you're still watching, if you haven't clicked away in defensive anger, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now, and here's why I'm asking. This video is going to make some people very uncomfortable. It's going to challenge ideas that feel deeply personal and emotionally true. The algorithm doesn't care about truth, it cares about engagement, and videos that make people uncomfortable often get buried. If you think this message matters, if you think someone in your life needs to hear this, that like tells the platform to show this to more people. Subscribe if you want to keep having these conversations that nobody else seems willing to have. Because we're about to go even deeper, and what I'm about to tell you might fundamentally change how you see your own behavior. Are you ready for that? Because there's no going back once you see it. Let's talk about what "I deserve it" is actually replacing. There's another phrase that used to guide purchasing decisions, one that sounds almost quaint now in its simplicity. Can I afford this? Notice the difference in those questions. Do I deserve this? Is emotional, subjective, and almost always answered with yes. Can I afford this? Is mathematical, objective, and requires you to actually look at numbers. Do I deserve this? Focuses on your feelings, your work, your stress, your worth as a human being. Can I afford this? Focuses on your bank account, your upcoming bills, your financial obligations, your actual reality. One question makes you feel seen and validated. The other makes you feel constrained and denied. Guess which one modern consumer culture encourages you to ask? Here's what happened when I started tracking this in my own life, and I want you to try this experiment yourself. For 1 week, every time you're about to make a non-essential purchase, write down the thought that precedes it. Not what you tell yourself afterward to justify it, but the actual emotional driver in the moment before you decide. What I found in my own spending patterns shocked me. 90% of my unnecessary purchases were preceded by some variation of deserve-based thinking. I had a stressful day. I deserve this coffee. I worked out this morning. I deserve this pastry. I dealt with that difficult person. I deserve to order takeout tonight. I finished that project. I deserve to browse online stores. Every single one of those thoughts felt true. Every single one of those emotional states was real. But none of them changed whether I could actually afford the purchase. Here's where this gets really uncomfortable, so I need you to stay with me. The "I deserve it" mentality isn't actually about deserving things at all. It's about emotional regulation through spending. It's about using purchases to manage feelings you don't want to feel. Think about when the "I deserve it" voice gets loudest. It's not when you're happy and content. It's when you're stressed, anxious, tired, frustrated, or feeling undervalued. The purchase isn't about the item itself. It's about the momentary relief from discomfort. That's not deserving, that's medicating. And like any medication, When you use it to treat symptoms without addressing the underlying condition, you develop a tolerance. The coffee that used to make you feel better stops working, so you need the coffee plus the muffin. The muffin stops working, so you need the weekend shopping trip. The shopping trip loses its effect, so you need the vacation you can't afford. Each purchase provides diminishing returns while requiring increasing investment. This is the addiction cycle, and we've normalized it so completely that calling it out feels like an attack on people's right to happiness. But here's what nobody tells you about emotional spending. The relief is temporary, but the financial consequences are permanent. That $8 latte makes you feel valued for maybe 20 minutes. The credit card interest on that latte, if you can't pay it off, costs you money for months or years. You're trading temporary emotional comfort for long-term financial stress, which creates more emotional discomfort, which drives more emotional spending. It's a trap that tightens with every rotation. I want to tell you about Jennifer because her story illustrates something crucial about how this pattern escalates. Jennifer was a nurse, 31 years old, pulling in $64,000 a year. Objectively decent income. She worked 12-hour shifts in an understaffed emergency room, dealing with trauma, death, and the absolute worst moments of people's lives. Her job was genuinely hard in ways that most people couldn't handle. So when Jennifer bought the expensive face cream, the luxury bedding, the organic meal delivery service, the spa day, she had a bulletproof justification. I save lives. I hold people's hands when they die. I deserve these small comforts, and she did deserve comfort. She deserved rest, care, and appreciation for the incredibly difficult work she did. But somewhere in that deserve-based thinking, a substitution occurred. She started using purchases as a proxy for the things she actually needed. She needed sustainable work hours, but she bought the sleep app subscription. She needed emotional support, but she bought the self-care products. She needed a less traumatic work environment, but she bought the weekend getaway. The purchases felt like self-care, but they were actually self-soothing. And there's a catastrophic difference between those two things. Self-care addresses the root problem. Self-soothing just makes you comfortable enough to tolerate the root problem a little longer. By the time Jennifer came to see me, she had $43,000 in credit card debt and a monthly budget that required her to work overtime just to make minimum payments, which meant more stress, which meant more deserve-based purchases, which meant more debt. She had built a cage out of her own coping mechanisms. Now I know what some of you are thinking, because I hear this pushback constantly. But life is short. You could die tomorrow. Why should I deny myself the things that make me happy? This argument sounds rebellious and wise, but it's actually the most insidious form of the deserve trap, and here's why. Yes, life is uncertain. Yes, you could die tomorrow. But statistically, you probably won't. Statistically, you'll be alive in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. And when that future version of you arrives, they're going to have to live with the financial decisions that present you made based on the assumption that future you wouldn't exist. This isn't hypothetical. I've sat across from 55-year-olds who can't retire because their 30-year-old self made purchases based on you only live once thinking. I've watched 60-year-olds cry because they have to keep working jobs they hate because their 40-year-old self deserved that luxury car lease. The future isn't an abstraction. It's where you're going to spend the rest of your life. And every I deserve this purchase you make today is a bill that future you has to pay, with interest. Here's the math that nobody wants to confront. That $100 I deserve it dinner, if you put it on a credit card with 20% interest and make minimum payments, costs you about $243 by the time it's paid off. You're not just buying dinner, you're buying dinner that your future self has to purchase again and again and again through interest payments. That's not self-care, that's self-sabotage with good marketing. Let me show you what this looks like when it scales up, because this is where the real destruction happens. Take Alex, 26 years old, making $48,000 a year in marketing. Alex grew up lower middle class, watched his parents stress about money his entire childhood, and swore he'd never live that way, so when he got his first real job, he made a decision. He was going to live the life he deserved, the life he'd worked so hard to build. The nice apartment in the trendy neighborhood because he deserved to live somewhere he felt proud of. The car lease because he deserved reliable transportation that didn't embarrass him. The wardrobe upgrade because he deserved to look professional and put together. The gym membership, the streaming services, the regular dinners out, the concert tickets, all of it justified by the same core belief. I worked hard to get here. I deserve to enjoy the fruits of my labor. Every individual decision made sense in isolation. But when you added them all up, Alex was spending 107% of his take-home pay. He wasn't just failing to save, he was going backward every single month. And here's the part that nobody talks about. Alex didn't feel like he was overspending. He felt like he was finally living normally, because the I deserve it mentality doesn't just affect individual purchases, it recalibrates your entire baseline for what normal life looks like. The lifestyle you deserve becomes the lifestyle you require, and anything less feels like deprivation, like going backward, like admitting defeat. So you keep spending because not spending feels like losing. There's a specific moment that happens in almost everyone's financial destruction story, and I need you to watch for it in your own life. It's the moment when you stop checking your bank balance before making a purchase. It's subtle, barely noticeable, but it's the moment when emotional justification fully replaces financial awareness. It happens like this. You're about to buy something you want. For a split second, a question flickers through your mind. Can I afford this? But immediately, before you can actually check, another voice responds. I deserve this. I work hard. I'll figure it out. And you make the purchase without ever actually looking at your account balance, without doing the math, without confirming that the money exists. You've replaced financial reality with emotional entitlement. I've done it. You've done it. We've all done it. And every single time we do it, we strengthen a neural pathway that disconnects spending from consequences. We train ourselves to prioritize how we feel about a purchase over whether we can actually afford it. This is how people end up with no idea how much debt they have. This is how someone making 6 figures ends up living paycheck to paycheck. This is how intelligent, capable, hardworking people end up financially destroyed while feeling completely blindsided by how it happened. Because they stopped looking at the numbers and started living entirely in the emotional justification. The numbers became something to deal with later, and later became never and never became crisis. I want to pause here and acknowledge something important, because I can feel the resistance building in some of you. This conversation is hard because it touches on something deeply personal. Your sense of self-worth, your relationship with work, your beliefs about what you're entitled to after everything you've been through. Some of you had childhoods where money was scarce, and every denied request felt like proof you didn't matter. Some of you are supporting families, working multiple jobs, holding together lives that feel constantly on the edge of collapse. The idea that you should deny yourself the small pleasures that make it all bearable feels cruel. I get it. I'm not saying you don't deserve good things. I'm not saying hard work shouldn't be rewarded. I'm not saying life should be joyless deprivation. What I'm saying is that deserve has become a loophole that lets us avoid the harder conversation about whether we can actually afford the life we're living. And avoiding that conversation doesn't make the math go away. It just means the math happens to you instead of you happening to the math. The bills still come. The interest still compounds. The debt still grows. But now you're not making conscious choices, you're just reacting in crisis mode, which is exactly when you make the worst financial decisions. So the question isn't whether you deserve good things. The question is whether you're willing to build a financial foundation stable enough to actually support those good things, or whether you're going to keep using deserve-based thinking to justify choices that make your future objectively worse. Let's talk about what financial stability actually looks like, because I think the I deserve it mentality has distorted our understanding of what we're even aiming for. Financial stability isn't about being rich. It's not about deprivation or misery. It's about having options when life goes sideways, and life always goes sideways. It's about the car repair that doesn't trigger a financial crisis. It's about the medical bill that doesn't force you to choose between health and rent. It's about the job loss that gives you time to find something good instead of having to take the first offer out of desperation. It's about being able to help someone you love when they're in trouble. Financial stability is freedom. Real freedom. Not the fake freedom of, I can buy whatever I want right now, but the actual freedom of, I can handle what life throws at me without collapsing. And here's what kills me about the deserve trap. Every time you choose the emotional satisfaction of an unnecessary purchase over building that foundation, you're not choosing freedom. You're choosing continued dependence on a paycheck, continued vulnerability to every financial shock, continued inability to actually change your circumstances. You're choosing the illusion of freedom over the real thing. Because real freedom requires delayed gratification, which is precisely what consumer culture has trained us to see as oppression. We've been taught that waiting for things you want is punitive, that saving for future purchases is denying yourself, that any gap between wanting something and having it is a gap that should be filled with credit. But delayed gratification isn't punishment. It's the price of actual autonomy. Here's a thought experiment I want you to really sit with. Imagine two versions of yourself 5 years from now. Version 1 continued exactly as you are now. Every deserve-based purchase, every emotional spending decision, every I'll worry about it later moment. Version 1 is 5 years deeper into whatever financial hole they're currently in. Working a job they might hate because they can't afford to leave. Stressed about money in ways that bleed into every other area of life. No closer to any major financial goal because there's never anything left to save. Version 2 made a different choice starting today. They didn't become a different person, didn't get a massive raise, didn't win the lottery. They just started asking, can I afford this, before asking, do I deserve this? Version 2 is 5 years into building an emergency fund, has breathing room in their budget, has options when opportunities appear. Sleeps better because financial stress isn't a constant background hum, is actually making progress toward things that matter. Same starting point, same income, same life circumstances. The only difference is which question guided their spending decisions. Which version do you want to be? More importantly, which version does future you deserve? Because here's the thing nobody wants to admit. Present you saying, I deserve this, about unnecessary purchases, is actually saying, future me doesn't deserve stability. You're prioritizing the emotional comfort of right now over the actual well-being of the person you're going to become. And future you has no voice in that decision. They just have to live with it. Now we need to talk about the social dimension of this, because the I deserve it mentality doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a social context where everyone is performing a version of success they can't actually afford. Your friends go to that restaurant, so you go to that restaurant because you deserve to be included. Your co-worker gets that new phone, so you get that new phone because you deserve to have nice things too. Your Instagram feed is full of people taking vacations, buying houses, wearing designer clothes. And if they can do it, if they deserve those things, then certainly you do too, right? Except you have no idea what anyone else's actual financial situation is. You don't know if they inherited money. You don't know if they're drowning in debt. You don't know if their parents are funding their lifestyle. You don't know if it's all credit cards and smoke. You're comparing your financial reality to other people's carefully curated fiction and using that comparison to justify purchases you can't afford. This is the social media effect on steroids. We're not just comparing our bodies or our relationships anymore, we're comparing our consumer choices and interpreting any gap as a deficit in what we deserve. If someone else has it and we don't, the problem must be that we're denying ourselves, not that we can't afford it. So we spend to close a gap that isn't real, using money we don't have, to impress people who aren't paying attention, in service of an image that makes our actual financial situation worse. And the saddest part? Everyone else is doing the exact same thing. We're all bankrupting ourselves to keep up with people who are bankrupting themselves to keep up with us. Let me tell you what happened to Sarah, the woman from the beginning whose story opened this video. After the bankruptcy, after the humiliation, after watching 7 years of financial mistakes get legally erased, something shifted. She started asking a different question before every purchase, and this is the question I want you to start asking too. Does this move me toward freedom or away from it? Not, do I deserve this? Not even, can I afford this? But does this purchase move me closer to financial freedom or further from it? That new lipstick moves you away from freedom. The emergency fund deposit moves you toward freedom. The delivery meal because you're tired, away from freedom. The meal prepped lunch that saves money? Toward freedom. The concert tickets on credit? Away. The free museum visit? Toward. Every single spending decision is a vote for the kind of future you're building. And when you frame it that way, when you make it about freedom instead of deserving, something interesting happens. The emotional charge changes. Saying no to an unnecessary purchase stops feeling like self-denial and starts feeling like self-respect. You're not depriving yourself, you're defending your future. You're not being cheap, you're being strategic. You're not denying what you deserve, you're choosing what you deserve even more. Because here's what you actually deserve. You deserve to not be terrified when you look at your bank account. You deserve to not feel trapped in a job you hate because you can't afford to leave. You deserve to help people you love without destroying your own stability. You deserve to build something that compounds instead of constantly starting over. That's what you deserve. And every "I deserve it" purchase that moves you away from those things is actually robbing you of what you truly deserve. There's a brutally simple truth that we need to confront, and it's going to sound harsh, but I need you to hear it. The world does not care what you deserve. The economy doesn't care how hard you worked. Your credit card company doesn't care about your stress level. Your landlord doesn't care about your emotional state. The numbers don't care about your feelings. This isn't pessimism, it's just reality. And the sooner you accept that reality, the sooner you can stop expecting the universe to reward your suffering with permission to spend. You know what does care? Your future self cares. Your kids, if you have them, care. The life you're trying to build cares. Those things are directly impacted by the financial decisions you make today. Every dollar you spend on emotional regulation is a dollar you're not spending on actual freedom. Every purchase justified by deserving is a purchase that your future self has to work to pay off. And here's the truly painful part. Most of the things we buy with deserve-based thinking don't actually make us happier. The research on this is overwhelming. After our basic needs are met, additional consumption has a shockingly small impact on sustained happiness. That expensive dinner feels good for an hour. The new clothes feel good for a day. The vacation feels good for a week. And then you're back to baseline, except now you're back to baseline with less money and possibly more debt. Meanwhile, the things that actually create sustained well-being, strong relationships, meaningful work, financial security, physical health, sense of purpose, those things are either free or require investment rather than consumption. I want to talk about what actually changes this pattern, because awareness alone doesn't fix it. You can know all of this intellectually and still find yourself making deserve-based purchases. The shift requires something deeper. It requires rebuilding your relationship with worthiness itself. Here's what I mean. For most people, purchases are how they prove to themselves that they matter. The nice thing says, "I'm worth investing in." The experience says, "I'm worth celebrating." The luxury item says, "I'm successful enough to have this." But when you need purchases to prove your worth, you'll never have enough. There will always be another thing to buy, another experience to have, another level of luxury to reach. Your worth becomes dependent on consumption, which means you can never stop consuming without feeling worthless. The actual solution is to decouple your sense of worth from your spending entirely. To find ways to feel valuable that don't cost money. To celebrate yourself in ways that build your life instead of depleting it. To prove your worth through the stability you build, the goals you reach, the freedom you create. This sounds like self-help nonsense until you actually do it and realize that the deserve-based purchases were never really making you feel better anyway. They were just postponing the moment when you'd have to actually address why you felt so bad in the first place. Sarah figured this out. After her bankruptcy, she started tracking not just what she spent, but why she wanted to spend it. What emotion was she trying to manage? What need was she trying to fill? And then she found non-purchase ways to address those actual needs. Stress. She started running, feeling undervalued. She asked for feedback from people who actually knew her work. Need for beauty? She went to parks instead of stores. Desire for celebration? She called friends instead of ordering delivery. We're reaching the climax of this conversation, the point where everything converges into a single, inescapable truth. The "I deserve it" mentality isn't just destroying your financial future, it's destroying it because it's lying to you about what you actually deserve. You don't deserve temporary emotional comfort purchased with long-term financial instability. You don't deserve the illusion of success that requires you to stay trapped in jobs you hate. You don't deserve the momentary pleasure that creates sustained anxiety. What you actually deserve is so much bigger than what consumer culture is selling you. You deserve a life where money is a tool you control instead of a crisis you manage. You deserve the ability to make choices based on what you want rather than what you can barely afford. You deserve to build something that compounds over time instead of constantly restarting from zero. You deserve to sleep at night without financial dread. You deserve to help people you love without sacrificing your own stability. You deserve freedom, real freedom, not the fake freedom of, I can buy this right now, but the actual freedom of, I have options, I have stability, I have built something that can't be easily destroyed. And getting there requires you to stop using I deserve it as permission to avoid hard financial truths. It requires you to start asking better questions. Not, do I deserve this, but, does this move me toward the life I actually want? Not, can I technically afford this right now, but, can I afford this and still build toward my actual goals? Not, will this make me feel better in this moment, but will this create or solve problems for future me? The tyranny of I deserve it is that it keeps you focused on right now while your future burns, and at some point, right now becomes your future, and you have to live in the ashes of decisions you made when you weren't looking at the bigger picture. So here's where we end, and here's what I need from you. If this video made you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort means you're close to something true. If this video made you angry, that's okay too. Anger is often what we feel when someone points out a pattern we've been trying not to see. But here's what I want you to do with that discomfort, with that anger. I want you to channel it into one single action. For the next 30 days, before every non-essential purchase, I want you to write down the thought that precedes it. Don't change your behavior yet. Don't judge yourself, just observe. Write down what you're feeling, what you're telling yourself, what you believe you deserve, and why. At the end of 30 days, look at what you wrote. Look at the patterns. Look at how much of your spending is actually about the thing you're buying versus the feeling you're trying to create or avoid. And then ask yourself honestly, did those purchases move you toward freedom or away from it? Are you building the life you actually want, or are you medicating the life you're stuck in? That's the real question. That's the question the I deserve it mentality is designed to help you avoid. But you can't avoid it forever. Eventually, the math catches up. The only question is whether you're going to face it proactively while you still have options, or reactively when you're out of choices. If this message resonated, if you think someone in your life needs to hear this, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment below, even if you disagree, especially if you disagree. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me your story. Tell me what you think people actually deserve when it comes to money, because this conversation is too important to have in silence. The I deserve it mentality is winning because we're not talking about it honestly. Let's change that, right now, starting with you. What do you actually deserve, and are your spending habits moving you toward it or away from it? Answer that question honestly, and everything changes. I'll see you in the next one.